Okay, so we are going to finish up the colored pencil basket of apples. So this is from the adult class, the adult art class at Warwick Township in Jamison, Pennsylvania. And so here is a copy of, or a picture of the finished piece. And so here is my working copy that is all done in purple colored pencil so far. And so I'll go through how to add some of the other colors. See if I can keep this up here so you can see it. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so again, all of your layering should be very light, almost fuzzy at this point. So have the purple, and I'm gonna start adding the yellow. So I'm gonna add some yellow. And as you can see, it's very light. I'm gonna add it on the apples as well. Making sure to leave the white spaces on the apples, I should say. And if you've already done this part, you can skip through. But everything is kind of a hint of color. We'll go back at some point and make parts darker. But for now, we just want a hint of this next layer of color. And you should be taking your time with this. I'm going a little bit fast here, mostly with the yellow because it's light, but the other colors I'm going to take my time. Rotate the camera just a little bit. There we go. Okay. So the other thing I want you to note is that I am kind of going around in circles as I shade. Okay. I think I'm finished with the yellow for now. I am now going to pick up the brown for the basket. So again, just very lightly for now. have to add in blue as well. I think I'm trying to remember the order I've told you originally. You know, it doesn't have to go in the exact order that I tell you, but I wanted to give you a definite type of order in order to go by. So with the brown, we're going to be doing some outlining a little bit, even though we're going to go back with blue. But now, starting to outline a bit of the basket, even though I'm going very light. But especially where the cuts are in the wood, you know, maybe going a little bit darker. Just adding some of those details. Before we start our shading. So we're basically kind of tracing over a lot of the parts. So over the handle, and we are going to add some brown in that shadow right here. We're going to add brown, but you know, we're going to go back and we're going to add some blue as well. Now when the shadow kind of separates, right, because of the lip here, it's going to be a little bit darker right there. Shadow is going to bend over the lip. And then boom, goes back down. But again, you can see how light it is. In the meantime, I'm going to be, you know, retracing with this brown. I'm going to add to the purple shadow on the handle here. I will get back to the cuts. Meaning the cuts in the basket. And just a little brown here. You know, again, lots of layering. Darken up a little bit of that shadow here. And then we're going to add brown, you know, to purple. A little bit on both sides of the handle here. And then start shading on the bucket. And again, you can see it's just a light shading. You know, I'll go back later to darken it, but we still need to add some colors. Okay, so now I'm going to do a little more shading up here on sort of the lid part. Again, very light. Very light. You know, I'm going to go shade again, or I should say kind of almost do like an outline at the top. And now I'm going to start shading in little sections to give it that texture bucket. It's a bit of a shadow here at the bottom. And I also want to shade a little bit darker toward the edge of the bucket, because that's going to give our eye the sense that the bucket is going around. I'm going to do the same on the other side. For right now, I'm just doing it light. This side is going to be a lot darker, so I am going to do a little bit darker. This side kind of warps a little bit too. So I've done that. Here, just a little bit. See how I go even lighter with the brown there. But then I'm also gonna start using very thin lines for the texture. Sometimes I'm kind of shading the lines. You can see as I'm doing it. So just adding some brown to the bucket. Now it is a bit darker toward the right side. So I'm going to go a little bit darker in my shading, but not a whole lot yet. Okay, and I'm going to continue this. some brown over here. And again, I'm going toward the edge here of the bucket, doing some shading. And then I also want to shade the buckle kind of part, but I'm leaving the top part sort of like there's a highlight, leaving it kind of the white of the paper. And then I'm going to come back down here at the bottom and go just a little bit darker. Yeah, we'll have plenty of time to go back and make that a bit darker. Okay, so I'm looking it over and I'm okay for now with some of this stuff. And now we're going to grab our blue. Okay, I'm going to sharpen mine just a little bit. All right, now our blue. So this, we're going to kind of outline everything very lightly. Our basket, our apples. We're going to be shading with it. This is the first step to basically our shadows. So right now, I'm pretty much just kind of outlining. But again, you can see some of it, it's very faint. Some parts I'll get a little bit darker. And one of the parts is going to be right here, where there would be a shadow. You know, we're going to go back and shade. Let's make some of this a little wiggly here. Reason being that I envision this being an old bucket. You know, it's kind of buckled from the elements, like it's outside a lot. Okay. So some of the parts that I do darker are where, you know, the shadows would be, like the darker shadows. So when an object is going into something or coming out of something, like right here. It would be darker because it's going into this sort of round crevice. Here, this would be darker. You know, anywhere where there's a perceived shadow, it's going to get darker. Right under here, there would be a shadow that's cast. So again, you know, I'll go back. Oops. Get rid of that. Here, where it meets sort of the part where it's resting. And we're going to go into the shadow. We're going to go into lots of shadows. Okay, so let's first start off with going into this shadow. I'm going to start off going, you know, a little light, but it's a little darker over here. So again, if you notice, I'm kind of shading in circles. See that very subtle shading produces a lot of color. I'm going to keep going here. And there's a darker shadow right underneath this apple. Like so. It will be even darker right underneath the apple. So even the shadow has a shadow. Make my shadow just a little bit longer here. It'll be a little bit darker here too. Okay, so already it's looking better. So let's come up here, add some blue to this part, and I'm going to go darker because it's pretty dark in here. And we're going to go inside the bucket. So we're going to start making our darks. We're going to use this blue to make it look like, you know, it's kind of really deep in the bucket here. Do some outlining. Yeah, we haven't done any shading yet. Up here. Just adding some cuts in the wood. And let's keep shading the wood for now. So we're going to go over the brown and purple that we started. I'm now going to start adding the blue in the bucket, mostly on top of where the brown is. We're basically adding to that shadow, or I should say shadow color. So first I'm just going inside the bucket. We're going to go a little on this shadow here. If you notice, I get a little darker right where the shadow starts to kind of bend. Get a little darker under here. I get darker right there, and then we're going to start to outline this again. So you want to make sure you have a nice pointed edge here. You know, the pointed edge is not so important when you're shading, ironically enough, but when you're outlining, yes. All right, we're going to shade here, and then we'll go back to the bucket. I know I said we're sticking to the bucket section, but I saw this, I thought, you know what, let's hurry up and kind of add some shading to it. Okay, darker here, and we're going to start adding some blue shading here. Here's some more. Again, you know, inside the brown. Make it a little deeper, right? The shadow. But again, I'm still going very light in certain sections. It's like a hint of the blue. Add a little more up here. Some here. I'm going to start outlining this a little bit. And here are some, you know, cuts in the bucket. Very subtle, but very subtle really makes a big difference, as you can see. You know, see all those layers already. Right. Again, making this a deeper shadow. Adding blue on top, all those colors, is making it get darker. And around here, it would be a little darker because it's in sort of the side. And then here at the bottom, we're going to get a lot darker with our shading. Now, not too dark because we still have to layer some red in there. Actually, some orange. This has a lot of blue in it. So we're going to do some shading here. And we want this to read that it is a cylinder. So you can see that I'm kind of making little lines, you know, to kind of indicate that it's round. Do some shading in the middle of this circular part. And we're going to start to go a little darker on this handle now. So, and I'm going to go a little darker even here. You know, and sometimes we need to take a step back and assess and go, you know, do we need to make it a little darker, even darker than we originally did it? Gonna add more blue here. And just a little bit underneath. Because we don't want the shadow to read that it's solid. So a shadow should never, you know, look like it's solid there. Just add a little more blue here. A little darker. All right, and now the apples. We're going to add just a hint. We really want to start adding more orange, or actually orange and red. So let's actually wait so you can see what that looks like. So our next step is going to be regular orange. I'm going to start here on this apple, make it a little rosy, but already, you know, it's going to start, you know, with just this little color, starting to look a little more like an apple. Again, very slow, almost meditative. Okay, let's add some here. So here's this apple. And again, you know, I'm making sure that I'm not coloring in the whole apple because we want it to look like that there is some light on it. I'm also sometimes going back and using round strokes as I'm coloring so that, you know, it also reads that it is a round object. Okay. add a little orange in the bucket as well. Not too much, but we can add it again to, you know, the shaded parts. And we're going to go back and add a little more brown. But this orange also gives it some depth. Add a little in this shadow here. A little more here on the back part of it, where it's a little bit darker. Okay, so that's our orange. And now we're going to add some of the red orange here. And so we're going to go into our apples. And here again, in this drawing, everything's very subtle. You know, even when you do drawings where, you know, there's a lot of vibrant color, you still want the underlayers to be lighter so that you can apply the final layers. And then you can do it vibrantly, but you don't want to do that too heavy at first, because then it won't, those layers won't shine through. So you're just going to take your time. As you can see, adding a bit more color, you know, and I can go back and get a little rosier even. This is kind of my initial coloring with the reddish orange. Okay, and it's looking more, I feel like they're looking more like apples. You can also kind of outline them a bit, which I'll go up and I'll do a little more of that up there. Add a little more color here. You know, and just take your time and have fun with this process. It takes a while. Okay, I'm going to add some red now to this side. And I'm going to start kind of coloring a bit deeper now. Those layers are there. Add some here to the back, this side. Add just a little bit to the shadow here. underside here. And yeah, I don't want to add too much red. I'm gonna go back one more time now with the apples and start adding a little more vibrant color. I'm gonna do a little bit of outlining, you know, on top of the purple, because our next step is going to be finalizing the shading. So, you know, you want your color to be a little darker when it's kind of leaning up against something. I know we talked about that in class. Same goes true for, you know, an object. A little darker here. And I really like the red orange. I feel like it's very much an apple color. You know, I'm going to go in just a little bit with the regular orange, but I think this is really the perfect color for a lot of the apple color. See, I go a little darker when it's next to it. Okay, let me come down here. You know, you may find you may have to go back in with a little bit of yellow. Okay, so now I'm going to grab the darker red, or, you know, just red. And I'm going to go back and just add some darker spots. Again, not too much. It's just really a deeper red. There we go, just a little bit. And now we're actually going to go in with a bit more of the brown. And then we're gonna add the black and we will pretty much be done. So I'm even gonna come around by the apples and I'm gonna go kind of in the middle of the apples here. And I'm gonna add, you know, some darkness to where the core is coming out. right? So you'd have the stem there. I'm gonna do the same here. Kind of drawing a stem in brown. Okay. And now we're going to add some more darker browns to some of the shaded sections, including I'm going to add some brown to in between the apples. Can even add a little brown to the shading of the apples. So now I'm just adding a bit of brown to some of the shading, even though I'm going to go back and add blue for the really dark parts. Go back to the basket here. The basket is really where we want to concentrate the brown. So now going back and adding some deeper shading and also some deeper cuts in the basket. Like you can already see, so up here, I like to make some of it a little darker along the edges of each side. Over here, because it's, you know, the apples are kind of resting near it. To go back and add some blue over there. So now I'm just kind of adding a light shading of brown, but then I go back in and I'm going to make some of these little cuts in the wood a little darker by kind of doing a quick outline and then adding, you know, some kind of squiggly, a little bit of squiggliness to the lines on top of the shading of the brown that we did. I'm now really making it look like, you know, that it's wood. So I'm going to come down by where the handle is and make a little more brown. Darker here. So again, kind of a combination of shading, a little darker, and then also adding in some more textural elements. More shading, and again, we're going to go darker with the shadow. Again, some darker shading here at the bottom. So pressing on the colored pencil, and then here, the bucket kind of goes in a little bit. There we go. And then much darker shading here. Do still want to add a little more blue, some black. I'm going to come and add some brown into this apple. And adding more brown here. And you can see I'm kind of making lines. And now I'm going to shade very lightly. On a lot of the basket here on the left side. And I'm not worrying too much about being neat about the shading because it's going to add to the texture of the wood. Get a little darker down here. And we're going to add some brown on the handle. And finally on the handle here as well. We're going to get darker. And here again. A little darker. A little shading more there. And then finally, again right here, now I'm starting to add darker lines here. A little bit of combination of outlining. But here we want a shadow. It goes around. And maybe we add some kind of shading kind of right above. And then more shading on the actual, band. A little more brown. And then again, we're going to do a little outlining underneath. And you can do a little shading underneath again too. That. And then we're going to grab our black. Okay, so our black is kind of going to be the final, dark happening in everything. So in between our apples, for, the parts where things are coming out of, you're also going to, outline in black. And take your time. Then you've got all those other colors. And it really helps not make the black so kind of dull. And you can go on top of your shading with it. You can make things a little darker with the bucket. So for instance, again, the parts that are the darkest, you can go in with the black. Now you don't want to make it so much that you're kind of making it like what I call marker dark, right? So I'm going to add a bit more of a shadow on this side. And a little bit on this side. But I'm not coloring to make it look black. I just want to give it a deeper, kind of a deeper color that's already there. And the black will help with that. Add a little shading here. little shading here because it helps the bucket to read that it's, you know, going around. And then I definitely want to outline and have this part of the handle a bit darker. So I'm going to go in and just darken up that shadow and then lightly shade right next to it. You know, again, this is with the black, just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go into the core of the apple here. Two parts of it. I feel like this needs a little bit of outlining, so I'm going to do that too. Then go in this section, give it a little bit of, you know, a dark shadow kind of in the middle of it. You know, I'm just kind of darkening up some spots using the black. You can see it's very light. You can barely tell that it's black because of the way that I use it. And now finally coming back here, and again adding some black. Sorry, my desk shakes. And a little more black here. And some back here. Just kind of adding some details here. A little bit of shading underneath the handle. And just going back and now kind of retracing just a little bit dark right where the apples are sitting. And I'm going to go back and make it just a little darker in certain sections. And again, you know, the core of the apples. You can see I'm only doing part of it, right? But it reads that it kind of goes inward. Add a little more color here. And I may add a little bit of some more brown up here. You know, and so at this point, you can now adjust any colors that you want. If you feel like you want to add a little more yellow, you could do that. If you want to get a little, you know, add a little more blue. I didn't add the blue yet to the the apples. So let's do that. It's a little bit of shading here. Again, just a little bit. Little dab will do ya. A little bit here. And we're almost finished. Be a little darker on this one since it's resting on the other one. And a little darker on the edge of this one. And same thing on this side. Okay, and then just making some final adjustments here. I'm gonna add a little more light brown to some spots, a little bit darker brown. Might add a little bit of blue here just to make that brown a little darker. So see what I did there? I added the blue, and it's a deeper shade of brown. So you can do that too. And then finally, just a little bit of black in the shadow, kind of overall. Just a little bit, like so. Just right underneath. I like to make a little bit more blue over here. So I'm going to add that. And maybe just a little bit darker right here. That's it. A little bit darker here. Using the black, I forgot here. Just a little more. And here for the outline. I think that's it. And there we have it. A colored pencil basket of apples. You know, I could sort of tweak this probably all night to make it a little bit more, you know, how you can just tweak everything. Like make it just a little bit more. But sometimes you ruin things by doing that. I have absolutely done that before. Oops. But I hope this was helpful for you, and I can't wait to see your completely finished product. So thank you. and I will see you in class next week.